for accelerated SDG7 action, with welcome remarks by our host, the distinguished Deputy Director General of IRENA, Ms. Gauri Singh.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you know, it's always a challenge competing with lunch, but I'm anyway glad to see that we have some of the key stakeholders in the room, and I think as we move ahead, we'll see many more come in. So thank you so much for joining us for this very important session today at the IRENA 13th Assembly. And I think the discussions today will help us take stock of the progress that we have made in implementing the global roadmap and collective actions that are required towards 2030. I think, you know, at the Assembly there's this energy that you can feel because we're probably meeting after 3 years, and it's a great occasion to see you all in person and be able to take the discussions forward. I have to say that while some progress has been made, and we know that renewables have been outpacing other sources in terms of the additional capacity that's being added. And in 2021, we had renewables forming almost 80% of the additional capacity that got added. And we do also have nearly 12.7 million people who are part of the renewables ecosystem and are creating value in the companies, in the areas that they're working in the renewables sector. So while this at a global level is a great picture, but when you start drilling down to regions and to countries, then I think it's much more focused in some regions and in some countries. So obviously while there's progress, but much more needs to be done. And over the next few years, to be able to realize the commitment that we made in 2015 when the SDG agenda was adopted, we did agree to hold ourselves accountable to that commitment, and that's why this conversation is extremely important. IRENA has been participating very actively in, as a member of the UN Energy in many different streams of work, including the development of the Secretary General's Global Roadmap for Accelerated SDG7 Action, and several energy compacts that were born out of this roadmap. I do have to say that, you know, the compacts that came together a couple of years ago have now also taken a life of their own and are now getting, the partnerships around them are getting much more deeper. And because these are more voluntarily led initiatives, I think that's what really gives them the strength. So we also think that, you know, we had paired up with many of you to create compacts around providing health facilities with sustainable access to clean and reliable power, accelerating the development of green hydrogen, strengthening and enabling environments for renewables adoption in agri-food systems, and increasing our understanding and ambitions for offshore wind development, and also enhancing our support for African LDCs and SIDS. So a fairly comprehensive set of agendas that were presented in the compacts. And we're happy to say many of them have now started really, as I said, getting a life of their own, and the partnerships are getting much deeper and more implementation and action focused. I also think that given the theme of the Assembly, which is the global stocktake, these become even more important because each of these are now starting to focus much more on what we need to take to the COP28 as our own effort in coalescing action and in being able to present very implementable and action-oriented roadmaps. So we hope that the discussions today will help us understand how, in our collective actions, we can push the needle and be on the right track to achieve SDG7 by 2030. So I look forward to the discussions today, and let me again welcome you all to this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director General. And as you heard, much needs to be done. And with the SDG7 Global Roadmap for Accelerated SDG7 Action, we have, of course, a clear pathway. And you also heard we need to focus more on implementation and action. And, of course, the energy compacts are one tool of achieving exactly this. So I'm now very pleased to invite for opening remarks the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy, Ms. Damilola Ogumbi.
Thank you so much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here, and I would try not to take up too much time because, you know, there is lunch being served outside. But in my capacity as Special Representative of the UN, the Secretary General's Assistant and Representative on Sustainable Energy for All, it's a pleasure for us to really reflect on what does SDG7 mean. We know that energy is that central point to everything we do, but more importantly, people-centered energy is important to just living a dignified life. So as we gather here today to think about the midpoint, I want to take into consideration three main points from the brief today. First, achieving our goals of SDG has never been more challenging. In many corners of the world, we're facing the emergence of a new global energy map in the midst of a global energy crisis, on top of a global climate crisis, food crisis, and lingering pandemic. These crises stack upon each other, gives us basically a higher sense of urgency on why it is just so important to achieve this SDG agenda, but particularly why it's so important to achieve SDG 7, which is really at the heart of achieving all the other sustainable development goals. Second, unfortunately, it is not all doom and gloom. As we start this year, we should remember ourselves how much we've achieved already for SDG 7, and there's a lot to take away. For example, last September, we marked our first annual progress review for the Energy Compact submissions, which are voluntary and specific commitments towards SDG 7. I remember the endless calls we had to have with my counterpart and co-conspirator Minoru, convincing people that the Energy Compact process, and I'd just like to thank everybody who took part in it because it was truly groundbreaking. We had 185 Energy Compacts received, 94 were reported in the year 2021 to 2022. Against this backdrop, we were also still recovering from COVID. But in the first year, the Energy Compact community invested $46 billion towards the commitments, and this resulted in enhanced electricity connections to 6 million people and improved access to clean cooking for 14 million. In addition, 88 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity has been installed, and 2,450 gigawatt hours of energy has been saved through energy efficiency measures. We need to urgently build on this progress, and that is why we're committed as a group, as a UN Energy family, to continue tracking this, but making sure that countries and the communities that have actually signed up to the Energy Compacts get the relevant support they need. Third and final, it's important that we look ahead. 2023, we see a review of the SDG process leading to the SDG Summit alongside the Secretary General's Climate Summit in September. As member states also prepare for the review of SDG 7 at the UN High-Level Political Forum this July. And the global stocktaking of SDG 7 is also to be held in 2024. So there's a lot to do. And part of our contribution through UN Energy and the global roadmap is to focus on the intersection of energy climate, and development, and recognize there are a lot of opportunities there. It's also important for us to have a particular focus on the developing world as they go through a lot of these crises much worse than other countries. So I just wanted to reassure you that we are fully committed at the UN. We really appreciate you being part of it, and anything we can do to support your SDG7 goals, please reach out to myself or Monoro or the team to move forward. I hope you enjoyed these deliberations today, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, SRSG. As you heard, the energy compacts are not just commitments, but there's also follow-up to this to ensure that the promises are kept and there's progress on the energy compacts. And we will have further opportunities to look at how far we're coming and to mobilize further action. As the SRSG mentioned, there's the HOPF SDG7 review in July, the SDG summit later this year, and then next year in 2024, of course, the global stock taking on SDG7 in New York. So now we're very, very happy to have with us today Her Excellency Ms. Falavavau Karina J. Silai Tualau Lele, the permanent representative of Samoa to IRENA. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'd like to first of all thank UN Energy and UNDESA for convening this meeting and for giving me this opportunity to provide some perspective from small island developing states at this event. SIDS recognize that solar, wind, and other renewable energy sources are now the cheapest electricity options in the vast majority of the world, outcompeting fossil fuels without subsidization. This is why AOSIS led the call for the phase-out of fossil fuel subsidies, which materialized in the decision adopted at COP26. SIDS' individual commitments towards energy transition is also demonstrated by the ambitious targets set out in NDCs under the Paris Agreement. 93% of SIDS and LDCs have already submitted enhanced NDCs or plan to do so, illustrating how those at the front lines of the climate crisis continue to lead in action. However, there are a number of barriers that prevent implementation of these commitments in SIDS, such as, firstly, the high landed costs of needed technology for SIDS to deploy renewables. Second is the increasing number of stranded assets and obsolete technology that are deemed high-emission technologies or maladaptive. The dumping of old and soon-to-be obsolete technologies by larger countries into SIDS that are moving ahead with their transition. And this is a reality for many of our countries, thus locking us into a development pathway that maintains inequality of rich and poor countries. Fourth is the loss of capital investment, as well as increasing costs of insurance for private sector. Fifth is access to finance and appropriate technology fit for local context, and access to general climate action financing for SIDS, private sector, and NGOs when compared to their counterparts in more developed countries, and therefore cannot adequately compete. In SIDS, these barriers have hindered the implementation of the energy targets in the Paris Agreement, the 2030 Agenda, and the Samoa Pathway. There is indeed an urgent need to address these obstacles and find collaborative means to implement these targets. In this regard, we call for a scaled up of new and additional international support to SIDS, as we are still recovering from the pandemic, grappling at the same time with climate change and advancing our sustainable development aspirations. Targeted assistance is also needed in overcoming legal and regulatory obstacles to create a more conducive environment to enhance investments and also to phase out fossil fuels while maintaining national ownership. There's also a need to scale up capacity building and technology transfer, as many SIDS still lack the necessary human and institutional capacity to realize their full renewable energy potential and also face inherent challenges in connectivity. Systemic changes are also needed to minimize the bureaucracy and simplify the process to access financing. As well, the interlinkages between energy and other development goals must be harnessed to maximize the co-benefits of energy transition and resilience building in other sectors such as healthcare facilities, transport, water, desalination, agriculture, and food security are critical to enhance resilience in future crises and emergency preparedness. Durable and sustainable private and public partnerships and investments with and in SIDS are critical. This year provides a unique opportunity to holistically address energy challenges across various frameworks and therefore provide further guidance for future actions, such as the Mitigation Work Program, the Global Stocktake under the Paris Agreement will both be addressing the issue of energy targets under the UNFCCC and identifying areas for enhanced action. At the same time, the SDG7 is under review at the SDG Summit being convened under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. There are also ongoing efforts to enhance voluntary commitments through the energy compacts that emerged from the UN high-level dialogue on energy last year. Friends, there is a great value in bringing coherence across these frameworks and work streams to maximize ambition and deliver effective results. Renewed and targeted action on the persisting gaps and challenges in SIDS can be addressed through the outcomes of the 4th SIDS conference, as well as the stocktake of SDG7, which will be taking place next year. It is also a critical opportunity to look at the energy goals beyond 2030 to ensure energy security for all while not leaving anyone behind. And as we also heard from the high-level plenary yesterday, the world must move faster than ever before. IRENA's role and mandate in working together with the United Nations and all of us is more critical now than ever. Friends, as the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, Samoa will continue to advocate for enhanced support for energy transition in SIDS, and we stand ready to work with the United Nations DESA, IRENA, and other actors who wish to support us on this journey. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency, for this very, very important perspective from Samoa, but also the SIDS more broadly. And as we all know, of course, the SIDS are at the forefront of the global efforts to tackle SDG7 and also on climate action, obviously. But as you heard also, there's need for scale up of support, international assistance, so we do not leave the SIDS alone. So with this, I want to invite Mr. Hans Olaf Ibek, Special Envoy for Climate and Security of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway, for his to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Martin. We are at the midpoint, so how are we doing? That's what we're going to discuss today. And maybe we'll start with raising the glass here. The question is whether the glass is half full or half empty. Personally, I'm always looking at this as a half empty glass, so that's where I'm coming from, since I'm not a very optimistic person. But In the current global political situation, for me, when it comes to SDG7, it's unfortunately a half-empty glass. And like the ambassador just said, we need to move faster than ever before, so because we are not doing too good. Like Damilola said, we are in the midst of the first global energy crisis, and this crisis actually started before Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. But no, the question that we are all faced with is, of course, will this crisis fast-track or derail our efforts to reach SDG7 by 2030? And for me, the facts are quite clear. We are not making enough progress, as has also been said by the two previous speakers. There are some bright spots, some progress have been made, but overall, we are way off where we actually have to be. So while energy action is needed more than ever in this situation, we are actually losing pace towards the achievement of SDG7. As co-facilitator of the SDG7 Technical Advisory Group, SDG7 TAG, together with Sheila, I have for many years been sitting in the UN calling for scaling up, and I think the last year we used dramatically scaling up our efforts, and we are definitely not there, so we have the work cut out for ourselves. Unfortunately, emissions are going up. Maybe we are seeing some leveling. Progress in electrification now seems actually to be reversed. Investments are way below where they should be. It should be at least double at this stage, maybe even tripling. The use of fossil fuel will not peak until the end of this decade, and our efforts on clean cooking and energy efficiency are way behind. And this is also coming on the back of the COVID crisis, and we have a financial crisis looming, or actually we are in the midst of it also. Just would like to draw your attention to the latest report from the World Bank saying that global growth now will be about 1.7%. It's the third weakest pace in nearly 3 decades, so it's lower than in 2009 and 2020. Debt levels are increasing. Investment growth is actually below average, and recession is a high possibility. And of course, the high energy prices also dampen outlooks for the economy. So this is again underscoring the need to scale up international cooperation, and we also need to explore further how we can increase public finance to leverage private finance. But at the same time, of course, public finance in OECD countries is also constrained. So as a born skeptic, then, my conclusion is that achieving our global SDG7 target doesn't seem very likely today until we really start rolling up our sleeves and taking more action. Why don't I see that? Because honestly, I don't see the will and commitment I would start with the voters, because we are actually the ones that are deciding who is going to be our political masters. And I don't see it from investors fully either, because there's a lot of money still being used into fossil fuels. And of course, the politicians reflect this. So now we need to make sure that we get the voters on board, and we had the youth forum here, and I think we need to be really pushed hard by all the young people to really step up our action, because we don't have any excuse for not doing so. We know what we have to do. We have the roadmaps. We have the SDGs, we have the Paris Agreement, and we have the global roadmap for SDG7 action. And we launched a number of compacts at the high-level dialogue 1.5 years ago. So now we all have to work together to achieve SDG7 as fast as possible. So let me highlight then 3 issues that we need to work more concerted on. And that is, of course, finance. We need to look at the transition strategies, and an issue that I've been looking at a lot recently, that is the availability of talents. First, finance, I already mentioned it, that we've seen declining investment levels. There's only $1 billion invested in clean energy in developing countries. That's way too little, so we need to ensure that we increase investments in developing countries. The cost of capital for solar PV plant in 2021 in key emerging economies is between 2 and 3 times, and I even heard 7 times higher here at the IRENA assembly. Secondly, countries need to develop broad transition strategies, and we have the Just Energy Transition Partnerships with South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and I think we also need to explore further how we can make JETP-like partnerships with countries to achieve the access targets. And we also need to remember, and you, Damilola, said it yesterday, that there are no energy transitions. It will play out differently in various countries. And a key challenge that we have in terms of moving forward is that we need both the clean energy and the fossil fuel systems at the same time. So we need to ensure that we can deliver energy services during the transition. So we can't discard the old before we have built the new system. And I think many countries now in Europe really realize this, that maybe they discarded the old before we really had the new system up and running. And finally, we need to ensure that we have the required talents to do the job. Yes, a number of jobs will be created, but the question is, do we have enough trained technicians, engineers, and managers to do the job? And in many countries, we already see the lack of trained people to do what we have to do. So we need to put a lot more emphasis on education and attracting talents to the sector. And of course, now in a time of crisis, we always put the spotlight on governments and how they react. So we need them to develop policies, regulations, and institutions that are fit for purpose and put them in place. Let me just highlight one issue linked to this, and that's the issue of permitting. We cannot just wait for 10, 15 years to give a permit to a mine or to a wind turbine or a wind park to be developed. So this is something that we as government representatives, we need to fast-track the permitting process. And like I started out with, we are now in uncertain times. We don't know how this energy crisis will evolve, and there's a risk of further energy disruption and geopolitical fragmentation. I'm hoping that despite this, that we will be able to stay the course and we will deliver jointly. But I'm concerned that when we see the increased fragmentation in the world, that this will also hamper our efforts, and it could be an increasing north-south divide in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as usual, Hans Olaf doesn't just leave us with a skeptic perspective, but he also points out some very specific guidance on how to improve, including on finance and transition strategies and building capacity to get the talent that we need. So this concludes our high-level opening segment. And Hans Olaf already talked a lot about the sort of the status of where we are and what still needs to be done, and this is actually a good bridge for the presentation that we will be hearing now from Ms. Heather Adair Rouhani, Air Quality and Health Unit Head at the WHO, who will be presenting on achieving SDG7, the gaps and priority actions. Thank you very much, Heather. Over to you.
Thank you very much for having me here. Indeed. I'm here on behalf of WHO, but also as a representative. WHO is chairing this year the SDG7 Tracking Progress Report, Custodial Agency report that comes out each year. So I'm actually here on behalf of not only WHO, but as well as the other custodial agencies, including IEA, the International Energy Agency, IRENA, UNSD, the UN Statistics Division, as well as World Bank. So this report, we've heard some great numbers, and so I get to put some pictures. Give you some of the highlights from this past year's report, as well as give you a quick kind of insight, a sneak peek as to some of the things that are expected this year in the report. The access to electricity is the first pillar of the SDG7, where we look at actually the progress made towards achieving universal access to electricity. As you can see, we are a bit behind. Indeed, we have about, since so leaving about 670 million people without access. Now, the lack of access is concentrated in various areas, for example. One area where we see a largest deficit is in sub-Saharan African countries. While most regions have shown consistent progress in electrification, the number has actually increased the number of people in sub-Saharan Africa has increased without electricity access. And at the country level, it's this least developed countries that we're seeing the largest deficit and the increase in deficit, such as, and these are typically the very big countries like Nigeria, DRC, and Ethiopia. They've all topped the list of global population lacking access in 2020. Progress in these particular countries is important to really accelerate the progress of electrification globally. But on the positive side, where it's not all half empty, some half positive, half full here too. They have around the 20 largest access deficit countries, including Kenya and Uganda. They made the fastest progress in the past decade. So that's electricity access. We're now going to take a sneak peek at the cooking access, which unfortunately it's still a bit dismal, the message that we're sending here. So in 2020, we estimated around 69% of the world had access to clean cooking. And this is just primarily relying on clean cooking. And so this leaves us about 2.4 billion in the year of 2020 of people still lacking access to clean cooking. But you can see that in some countries, the access rate has increased a lot. We can see for the 5 most populous LMIC countries, Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, we've seen a massive increase, actually, in access to clean cooking. From basically, we have an increase of almost 25% in these countries from 2010 to 2020. But you look then at all the rest of the countries, and we basically see virtually no progress. We've basically increased from 48% to 52% over the last 10 years. So this shows that we really need to accelerate our focus on clean cooking to ensure development priorities are met. And just similar to electricity access, we see the same large deficit and the actual increase in the lack of access of clean cooking in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's actually outpacing population growth. We only had 8 million people gain access to clean cooking over the last 10 years, whereas compared to, we've actually had an increase in population by 26 million. So this shows that we really need to focus on sub-Saharan Africa to ensure clean cooking. But we also see there's some great progress happening, for example, in Central Asia and Southern Asia, along with Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia. They accounted for most of any of the access gains we've seen in clean cooking between 2010 and 2020. Now, taking a sneak peek at the renewable energy, which is, I think this is the crowd that they're all looking forward to looking at these slides. We actually have seen some similar trends where we're still a bit behind. This is looking at how actually we have seen an increase in the percentage of renewable energy consumption. However, when you're looking at the total final energy consumption, this percentage has not really increased over the years. We've had a 70% growth in global consumption of renewable energy, but when you look at that in the total picture of total final energy consumption, we have not seen much change. So essentially, so there's two simultaneous trends that account for the seeming contradiction. Traditional use of biomass has been slowly declining, about -5% during the past decade, while the use of modern renewables, that is, excluding traditional use of biomass, we've actually seen an increase of almost 50% in the total final energy consumption. And it's been basically, the total final energy consumption, the renewable contribution has risen from 8.6% in 2009 to about 11.5% in 2019, over the decade. So to ensure that we achieve SDG7 and provide access to affordable, reliable, sustainable energy, a considerable acceleration in the uptake of modern renewables will be required, along with more efficient use of biomass and substantial progress in energy efficiency as well as conservation. Now, looking a little bit more closely, as noted before by Mr. Hans Olaf, the progress varies, this is a different slide, varies across regions. We see in 2019, 44% of the global year-on-year increase in consumption of modern renewable energy occurred in Eastern Asia, well, essentially China, owing primarily due to the deployment of hydropower and solar PV, followed by wind, with leading contributions from some of the European countries like Germany and the United Kingdom. They accounted for about 15% of the European countries accounted for about 15% of the year-on-year growth in modern renewable energy use in 2019, despite less favorable conditions from hydropower and wind power and modern energy for heat and transport and solar PV have filled in that gap. We see Latin America and Caribbean and Eastern Asia saw the most rapid annual advances in the share of renewables and total final energy consumption in 2019 to about around 0.6% and 0.7% respectively. Now, if we look here, this is the developing countries added record new renewable power capacity, but non-renewable additions still are dominating. As we had seen also as previous slides, in terms of the total final energy consumption, we see a similar trend here. Basically, although we see the increase in renewable energy taking place in low and middle income countries, we still a much greater increase in the non-renewable energy sources, showing that we need to push a bit more to get this going further. In addition, the SDG7 progress report also provides information on specifically the amount of international public finance to support renewable energy in developing countries. So when we look at this, we actually see that, in fact, the flows have decreased for a second year in a row. We had the peak of basically in 2017 for the public sector's investment in renewable energy for low and middle income countries, but now we're actually seeing a decline. So flows decreased from a second year in a row. In 2019, they amounted to 10.9 billion US dollars, down by nearly 24% from the previous year. And this is where we can see that it has hit some particular intentions required to include these furthest behind. It's the least developed countries received 25.2% of commitments in 2019, which is an increase from 21% in 2018. So we are seeing that there is some more attention being given to low and middle income countries. Now, looking at energy efficiency, the third pillar of the SDG7, we see that the global annual improvements of energy intensity averaged around 1.9% in 2010 to 2019. And this is due to a slowdown in recent years. The average annual rate of improvement now has reached to 3.2% each year until 2030, and that is needed to reach the SDG 7.3 target. And here we see that energy intensity improvements differ widely across regions and countries. Eastern and Southern Eastern Asia was the only region that overachieved the SDG target 7.3 between 2010 and 2019. This is similar to what we've seen in other improvements in access, for example. These regions have really dominated. But the lowest rates of improvement for energy intensity were actually, energy efficiency were achieved in Latin America and the Caribbean, followed by Western Asia and Africa. So this SDG7 progress report also provides an outlook. This outlook looks at essentially where we're at. This is typically uses the new policy scenarios of the International Energy Agency to actually look at what's needed to achieve SDG7 targets by 2030 or beyond, and if we're on progress or not. So we can see here that in the net zero emissions by 2050 scenario of the IEA, around 45% of people getting access to electricity do so by the grid by 2030. The rest are served by mini-grids and standalone solutions. And almost all off-grid and mini-grid solutions are 100% renewable. So this is very encouraging in terms of achieving both access as well as renewable targets. Now, if we look here, this is the, this is the access to clean cooking. Based on today's policies and plans, around 2.1 billion people would still lack access to clean cooking in 2030. 2.1 billion by 2030. This is more than half of those gaining access by 2030 in the IEA's net zero emissions by 2050 scenario, and they do so through improved biomass cook stoves, biogas and ethanol, and nearly a quarter each through LPG and electricity. Now, in terms of what's to come in the next report, as this is more of a sneak peek. Ideally, we would have been able to provide a few bits of the stats, but those are still being compiled at the moment, and then we'll be going through the commission, regional commissions soon to get their validation of the data. In the upcoming tracking report, we hope to have, we will have updated statistics for each of the 3 targets, as well as the 7.1.A. And we'll also, which happens every year, these statistics are also available online to support member states tracking their own progress and other development partners understand where the importance are needed. In addition, we'll have some connecting the policy with progress via the World Bank's RISE report for each of the various targets included in the SDG7 goal itself. This, for the first time last year, the RISE report included clean cooking, so this will really enable us to use this RISE report consistently throughout the entire report. In addition, we'll have a discussion of the SDG7 and its interlinkages with other SDGs. In addition, the other topics will be likely touched upon, such as the narrative will include on energy security, climate, connections, equity, finance, and others. So we really hope that you will be looking out for this report. Like I said, it will come out probably at the beginning of June, just to inform the high-level political forum, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather, and to the WHO, who's serving as the chair of the Tracking SDG7, the Energy Progress Report 2023, so this year, together with the SDG7 indicator custodians. And I think we were provided with an excellent overview of where we stand and also an outlook forward. And this is a great basis for our next discussion now on addressing gaps in implementation through energy compacts. And I'm very pleased to hand over to Ms. Kanika Chawla, Chief of Staff of SE4All, to moderate this discussion. Thank you, Kanika.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Heather, for that very humbling presentation, I would say. You know, a lot of the discussion that has been happening in the plenary here in the last day and a half has been really quite encouraging as we hear from across stakeholder groups a lot of ambition to do more. And yet when we hear that despite some of the economic cost advantage gains that renewable energy has made, only 1/3 of new capacity that is being added is from renewable energy sources. So there is a long way to go, and this is really the spirit in which the energy compacts were born at the high-level dialogue in 2021, where the focus was to kind of take a evidence-based approach and to focus on what are the set of short-term actions that can help deliver our long-term goals, both in the form of SDG7 by 2030, but completely aligned also with the net zero goal by 2050. And having said that, as you heard earlier today from the SRSG, we received over 185 energy compacts, which together actually amount to an investment commitment by 2030 of over $600 billion, which will be monitored every year. And in just 2021-22, already $46 billion were invested in SDG7 by this community. So while still woefully short of where we need to go, I think it is it is definitely both the start of a community of actors that can act decisively on their own, but also can go further faster by acting together. And this is also why today it's my pleasure to bring together many of these partners to talk about their progress so far, but also their ambition going forward. So we will hear from the United Arab Emirates, from Kenya, as well as from Eni. And then we're maybe going to turn back to you, Heather, for reflection on how these set of actions that are already underway can help make progress that is so urgently needed in the presentation that you just made. So with that, if I can please turn to Ms. Nawal Al-Hani, who is the Director of the Future Energy Department at the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure of the UAE.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me today to speak about UAE and the progress that we are making in the clean energy. So, when it's come to UAE, we already in 2017 launched our energy strategy, the long-term vision strategy for 2050. Now we are refreshing the strategy, and we have the first review for this strategy, as UAE already have raised the ambition to achieve the net zero by 2050. So we are revising and revisiting all the targets for the energy mix to have more cleaner and renewable energy within that. So basically today, as we achieved 100% access to population to electricity by 2021, and so for the previous years, as well as we already achieved 100% when it's come to clean fuel and energy and technology for the cookings. Also, for UAE in 2021, we have also achieved 19.63% of contribution of clean energy by this year from the total energy mix. And we have almost 7,035 megawatt from clean energy 2021. Out of that, it is 12% for renewable energy that was achieved by 21. So also, if you know that UAE also hosts the 3 largest single site PV plants in the world, which is Noor Abu Dhabi, Al Dhafra, as well as Mohammed bin Rashid PV plant. In addition to that, we already have developed our national hydrogen strategy, where we are targeting to achieve the top 10 countries producing hydrogen by 2031. So all of these achievements have already enabled us to lead the diversification of energy for the country itself, to have the security of supply and to have affordability when it's come to the cost of energy, as well as sustainability at the trilemma for our strategy. This is in lump sum. This is an update from our side, and I will be happy to give more elaboration if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may quickly ask you a follow-on question, there is a lot of progress that the UAE has been making, as well as very ambitious commitments. How do you think that, as part of the Energy Compact community, and because we have the Energy Compact Action Network, how can other compact proponents learn from the example of the UAE, but also what are some of the potential areas for collaboration with your compact commitments?
Definitely. So in the area keynote speak, they mentioned three items: long-term vision or strategies, where we could also share experience how to develop those. Where also we already using the Flexi tool, which is developed by Arena, and other softwares, Flexus, and templates as well. And when it's come to the talents and R&D and innovation, we have Masdar, we have Khalifa University, we have Sharjah University, we have the top universities that also concentrate in the clean energy, and we have Rich, which is the concern about hydrogen. When it's come to also the finance, UAE already contributed or invested about more than $40 billion till date, and also we are willing to contribute $163 billion till 2050. This is some numbers. So when it's come to how to share this experience, I think one of them is this platform. We could also exchange our thoughts and idea and also to check where is the area of collaboration. And from yesterday, if you see the social media, we have a lot of collaboration with different leading countries when it comes to energy and to ensure the global energy security with our different counterparties.
No, thank you very much for that. I mean, I think one of the really important pillars of what we're trying to do through the Energy Compact Action Network is bring together offers of support like the one that you just made, specifically also on finance, with countries that have put forward very clear requests for support under the UN energy process. With that, if I could please turn to you, Paul. So Mr. Paul Mabuti is the Senior Deputy Director of the Ministry of Energy in Kenya. And Paul, I think one of the things in Heather's presentation that perhaps would have given all of us the most pause was the lack of progress on clean cooking, but also just the future outlook that looks not, I mean, to be fair, it just looks bleak. I mean, 2 billion people without access to clean cooking in 2030, it just, and I know that Kenya has been also leading several of the discussions through the UN energy process on clean cooking, so maybe if you could reflect on that, please.
Thank you very much, and it is true that Sub-Saharan Africa remains one of the regions with the lowest access, and clean cooking, therefore, is one of the areas where we lag behind, and a lot of actions are really required. And in terms of the energy compact that we submitted, there has been some mix of success in implementing this. I'm going to be highlighting some gaps that we see in terms of political, finance, technology, supply chain, as well as affordability. But let me first of all indicate from the Kenyan perspective where we have been and where we are. First of all, there has been multiple points of action that we see in implementing commitments under the Energy Compact on clean cooking, because to us, this is the area where we have the largest challenge, because electrification, we've been making good progress. Right now, we are speaking about close to 77% access, but in clean cooking, we are still below 30%. Now, there has been some multiple actions that have been taken and support coming from different sources and partners. We have implementations of biogas program, which is being supported by some partners, including SNV. We have GIZ also supporting clean cooking, improved cook stoves through the GCF funding. And then we have also developed a clean cooking strategy. This is to just provide a roadmap of what needs to be done. Now, in terms of what we committed to do in the compact, we have rolled out a program to transition public schools which have been using biomass for cooking, and now we are moving them to cleaner fuels, LPG and others. And this is actually using local public finance, because in our billing for electricity, we have a tax component where we receive some amount from the consumers, and that is what we are trying to use now to roll out to schools. And the target now is 500 schools per year, and we are targeting to achieve all the schools transitioning by 2025. However, we need support in this because the public financing is not adequate. And we believe if we can get support from others, then we can be able to scale and accelerate that process. We've also made a policy commitment to achieve universal access to cooking, clean cooking by 2028, which is 2 years before 2030. It's a big challenge, but we have had good support even from the government. Now, one other thing which I see as a gap in terms of the implementation is there has been many players who are doing different pockets of activities here and there, but we've not been able to aggregate the total output from these different players And so that calls for a standardized framework for reporting so that a country can be able to say, we started from here, this is where we are, and we have standardized metrics which could then be comparable to other countries. In this sense also, Kenya is supporting the Energy and Gender Compact, which has also clean cooking as part of it, and we have been participating in that process to see how do we leverage from the support coming from the partners that are supporting the gender and energy aspect. And so this has been part of the things that are helping us. Of course, we are also actively participating in the HEPA process. And in the HEPA process, there is a clean cooking. There has been a program of activity that has been agreed upon. And we are trying to see how we work together with other Nexus sectors to be able to put together the issues of health, the issues of energy that are emanating from clean cooking. So in this sense, there has been some mixed progress that has been made, but in my assessment, this is not enough. We need really to accelerate. And therefore, one other big thing which I think would be impactful is if we are able to look at the technology solutions supply chain in terms of being able to put in capacity for manufacture, and that would look at components like the electric cooking, which we are also doing a strategy, the issues of ethanol cooking. There has been some private investment in this area, and then the issues of the improved cook stove where we are doing, there's one private firm which is doing manufacturing in Kenya. But this is now what has been done in Kenya. There is quite a lot that requires to be done in the region. But my last point is on electrification, that Kenya also now provides support to our neighboring countries in the area of geothermal. So we've been discussing with Ethiopia, Djibouti, and some number of wells are being drilled using the experiences and expertise from Kenya. And I think that goes a long way. So as we move now to the global stock take of where we are getting to, I think the critical gap that we need to address is, do we have a standardized, agreed framework through which countries can be able to report so that what Kenya reports, what Uganda reports is in a standard format, which will then be able to provide the necessary comparison. So for us, I think that is, and we are at a point where we are saying the SDG7 is at now a midpoint. Where are we? How do we assess that progress if we do not have the framework? So I think we need to agree on that. And so let me pause it there because of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And points very well noted, especially on the need for empirical baselining. And I think that's also why the report that Heather presented is so important, because it shows us how far we have come, but also how far we have to go. But very, very important around having the same reporting metrics, of course. One of the other unique, I would say, characteristics, but also I would say an advantage of the Energy Compact process is to the point that you said that there is not inadequate public money, and a lot of this needs to be done in collaboration with private sector. And so while there are several commitment processes for the private sector, as well as for governments, they're often not the same. They run in parallel rather than intersect with each other. Whereas the Energy Compacts actually brings together stakeholders from across the energy ecosystem, but also beyond, from kind of in a whole of economy way, to make commitments so that we can work together. And so as we turn to you, Marco Pireda, who's the head of international affairs and analysis and business support at ENI, as you reflect on the progress you have made and the commitment that you have set for yourself, could you also maybe reflect on what was the motivation for ENI to participate in this process and almost make a call to action to others to also join this process?
Thank you, Kanika. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today to discuss and present the progress that we're making towards the achievement of the SDG7. In particular, ENI in 2021 committed to reach a goal regarding the Pillar 7.2 and increasing, in order to increase the production of electricity from renewable sources. Our goal set for 2030 is to reach at least 15 gigawatts of renewable power production. In terms of implementation, we have already registered a steep increase because we are now around 2 gigawatts and we are planning to reach 5 gigawatts by 2025. But ENI strategy, of course, goes well beyond 2030 and is wider in terms of sectors and initiatives and technologies than only renewable production. And I will touch now on the point you raised, Kanika. Well beyond, because we are committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and we have been recognized by independent players such as Carbon Tracker that our plan is the best in the sector in terms of compelling, challenging mid-term goals. For example, we are committed to reduce scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 35% in 2030 and by 80% by 2040. As regards our own operations, so scopes 1 and 2, the reduction will be in a couple of years by 2025 minus 40%, and we will be net zero in operations in 2035. This is the progress and the strategy long term. I said wider because we are considering other areas for possible compacts and commitments. Let me name two. One is clean cooking. We are investing and are committed for financing clean cooking projects in order to allow for clean technologies and tools for the access of about 300,000 people to clean cooking by 2025. And final point on technology solutions, biofuels and biorefining. As our friends from Kenya know very well, we are committed to transform our mid and downstream, replacing conventional fuels with biofuels, also in terms of production of crops for biofeedstocks. To react to your point, let me close with emphasizing that our compact goals are fully coherent with our business and our financial strategy. What does it mean? Tomorrow, we will issue a bond based on our sustainable goals, ranging from 1 to 2 billion euros, a retail bond, and this bond is based on the respect of our renewable power production and capacity and on our reduction of emissions. If we reach the goals, we will pay less interest. If we don't, we will pay more interest. This is, let's say, combining the reputational motivation of an international company with the very tangible financial, monetary incentives that need to be in the game to, let's say, bring all the actors together. Thank you.
Actually, thank you very much for that. I think that's a very encouraging thought, to think that action on SDG7 is good business, it's good economics, and it delivers gains, as we've heard, also for local communities in developing and developed countries. Having said all that, this is, there are so many countries around the world, as well as companies around the world, that have these commitments, especially long-term commitments, and then now through the Energy Compact process, also commitments looking forward to 2030. Heather, maybe if I can give last word to you, and in the interest of time, just maybe for a minute or so, to just reflect on how because you've been engaging with the data and the science, but now that you've heard also, the country experience, the company experience, how optimistic are you feeling? Is it glass half full or glass half empty?
Thank you. No, this is very true. I have to say all of these were very promising and encouraging, and I think that that's where we need to go. If we really want to achieve, we need to be looking at this as a glass half full, and that there is progress, and that we need to be replicating this. It's great to see such great commitments from the private sector, as any, for example, to clean cooking and to other things, and showing that they have an accountability mechanism in place for if they don't meet their targets. That's also great in terms of showing real responsibility, a corporate responsibility. We see great commitments from UAE, for example, in terms of financial, and they're actually already demonstrated their commitment to moving forward towards the renewable targets that we put forward. We see great progress in Kenya, leading by example for the region, really committing, and they're taking it on themselves to actually achieve the clean cooking target before 2030. That would be absolutely amazing. And you know, there's a lot of cooperation, it seems, too, in terms of using their renewable energy in their terms of geothermal with Ethiopia and Djibouti, et cetera. And then we also see, for example, yeah, I think we definitely have progress. We have private sector investment, and we have country commitment, and we just need to keep carrying these forward to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also, my deep appreciation for all of our speakers, and thank you very much for your leadership. The Energy Compact Action Network is, I mean, the word action is in there for a reason. It is what drives us. And so you will be hearing from us as we move ahead to the next annual Compact update, but even before then, to identify opportunities for collaboration between compacts. So with that, thank you very much. I'll hand back over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Kanika, for the excellent moderation as usual. And we heard a lot of very good examples of concrete action now, and but our next discussion will take us back to the global and also regional level, and what needs to happen there to drive progress on SDG 7. And to moderate this discussion, I will hand over to Mr. Minoru Takada, Team Leader on Energy and Head of the UN Energy Secretariat at UNDESA. Over to you, Minoru.
Thank you very much. I think time is pressing. I know that we can use it up to 2:45, so bear with us a little bit. So we put up a slide here on the 2015, you know very well, of course, SDGs are born together with the Paris Agreement. So that's a start. And then we got the 15 years to go in terms of getting it right for the SDGs. We're just exactly at the midpoint this year. So just sort of, reflecting the historically here, on 2018, we had the first review of SDG7 at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. And many of you contributed to that process. And then we voiced the concerns, and then we said we need to scale up. 2021, many of you referred to the process called UN High-Level Dialogue on Energy, born outward, a global roadmap for accelerated SDG7 action, and then just now we went through that series of energy compacts. They gave a lot of momentum. Now, 2023, we have another opportunity to review formally SDG7 at the global level in July at the UN High-Level Political Forum. So this is the beginning of this year, and then start designing the processes moving forward, both at the global level, regional level, and the Radia will be able to tell a little bit about, at the regional level, what we are actually going to be doing at the United Nations as well. It comes at the time when we have also once in 4 year SDG Summit, which is a heads of states gathering in New York in September. They will issue a very special political declarations covering entire SDGs. SDG 7 should be one of them, of course. Then Secretary General will be convening Climate Ambition Summit at the same time as well. And of course, UNFCCC COP28 here in UAE is a great opportunity to push energy agenda forward, not least because it's the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement to come. And I'm quite certain energy is going to be one of the central elements without a doubt. And then we have to see how best we can contribute to that. Let me say a few words about what to come beyond this year, 2024. UN General Assembly just decided to have global stocktaking, just focus on SDG 7. So again, this is another opportunity And the summit of the future is going to be convened at the time of General Assembly in September 2024. This is going to be one of the consequential, I would say, the summits over the last couple of years, looking not just backward, but of course, going beyond the role of multilateral systems, and of course, looking at the beyond even 2030. I'm sure that delegates here will have some reflections on those things. All those things hopefully be able to sort of give a momentum toward 2030. At that time, we want to see SDGs achieved. But of course, moving into beyond 2030, by the time of the 2050, we want to see just a resilient net zero society, leaving no one behind. So reflecting on those things, okay, what's the expectations in terms of focuses? Now, we want to take advantage of all those processes as the United Nations, and then I want to design the processes very well, but we want to hear from you, your perspective on focuses. And how do we design the processes to make sure we can focus on that, the issue that you think we should be focusing on? What outcomes do we want? We can write a lot of documents. I'm quite good at it, but probably not sufficient to get to the 2.1 billion people who are not going to be having access to clean cooking by 2030, according to Heather. So we have to do a little more than that. So what outcomes do you expect? And then finally, if you have any suggestions, perspective on what the role of United Nations here, we are gathering this sort of, this event in the name of UN Energy, which is a network of UN entities working on energy. And if you have any suggestions, we welcome. And then there are colleagues who are from the UN Energy Organization who are represented here. We welcome the perspective. Now, we have got only 15 minutes to go, right? Unfortunately. So I'll call upon our panel members to think to direct. The input is going to be very, very helpful. First, may I call upon Mr. Mohammad Imran Khan, Councillor, Permanent Mission of the Pakistan to the United Nations. Imran, floor is yours.
Thank you, Vinoro, and thanks for presenting this picture to us and providing us a brief of the UN processes. I take the point from your slide, which is going beyond 2030 and 2030 itself, and that your slide presents a very rosy picture that SDGs achieved. So, but honestly, if you look at the perspective, right, if you look at the progress that we have been making so far, and I agree with Hans that the glass is definitely half empty. The reasons, I think that has been elaborated, particularly on SDG7 by many of the speakers that have spoken before me. But I think three main factors that I would highlight, I think recently, in the recent history of the United Nations, that have contributed so badly to the progress of the SDGs. One is, of course, COVID-19 and the recession, which shrinked the fiscal space of many developing countries, particularly. They had to make hard choices, either to feed the people or to pay their debt. Second is the recent geopolitical tensions and war in Ukraine, which has triggered spiraling inflation, particularly in food and fuel. And that is unbearable for many countries, and particularly my own country. And the third factor is climate change. The impact of climate change is so unbearing for many developing countries that the cost that they have to bear is 3 or 4 times to do any kind of development activity in the country. For example, the massive floods that my country has experienced last year, the total estimated damage is, and that's the estimates by the World Bank, $40 billion. $40 billion is the net impact of those floods on a country like Pakistan. So that These three factors have contributed adversely to the achievement of the SDGs and, of course, SDG 7. So what is clear is that developing countries are facing a perfect storm. And the most important issue is that money is in short supply, especially after COVID-19. So, and if you look at the analysis after COVID-19, the total investments and analysis by UNCTAD, which was required, was $2.5 trillion per year pre-COVID. And now it's $4.3 trillion per year, which is almost double. So what has to be done at this stage? I think there has been a couple of initiatives taken, a couple of documents available. And most recently, the one that I referred to is the outcome document of the G77 Ministerial Conference. The conference document highlights key areas in which we have to work and key priority actions that have to be taken short term and in the long run. I would say some of them. First is, for example, a multilateral mechanism for sustainable management of sovereign debt. And this unbearable debt is, in fact, bearing a burden on many developing countries. So maybe we need to have a sovereign debt authority or a mechanism at the UN. We also need to have a full commitment of the ODA, which is 0.7%. And if we fulfill that, it would generate an additional $380 billion. We also have to have the reallocation and new allocation of the SDRs. 650 billion has been allocated, but more than 400 billion is going to the countries which actually don't need it. So the developing countries that need it, I think we need to have a rechanneling of those SDRs. There is an SDG stimulus announced by the Secretary General, and that also speaks about the new general allocation of the SDRs, somewhere to the tune of 500 billion. I think that's a good initiative. We also need the recapitalization of the multilateral development banks, which could be giving concessional loans and grants to the developing countries. One important issue is also the borrowing cost, which is extremely high for many countries because of the role of the credit rating agencies. And that has to come down. I think one initiative was announced by the Economic Commission of Africa, which was Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. And it's kind of a repo facility at a global level to provide collateral and reduce the cost of borrowing for developing countries. That could also be an initiative to provide sufficient liquidity to the developing countries. And the second factor, which would be important, is to provide technology, and that technology is particularly important for achieving the SDG 7. There are leaders in renewable technology, and there are followers in the renewable technology. But I think we need to bring the countries at par. And the document that I was referring to, that speaks about a global technology compact. And that compact would make those technologies which are aligned with the SDGs available to all developing countries. If we need to create exceptions, or if we need to finance trips and trims, then I think we need to do it. Because without the transfer of technology, without the availability of technology to the developing countries on concessional and favorable terms, I think it's impossible that we're going to achieve that. Now, a bit of reflection on the processes that you have referred. I think my own delegation has always been instrumental in spearheading and making progress on the SDG 7. We co-chair the group of Friends of Energy with Norway, with Sweden, and also with Ethiopia. And the group has always been instrumental, for example, having a standalone SDG 7 in the 2030 agenda, then on the high-level dialogue, then again on the global stocktake. So as you mentioned, many processes are coming in future, and we need to keep track of all of them and to keep this energy goal alive. I think one important mechanism which we could think of is to have an energy forum. If you look at Addis Ababa Action Agenda, in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, we have a Financing for Development Forum, which reviews the progress every year on all the 7 action areas which have been highlighted in Addis Ababa Action Agenda. So kind of a similar forum, I think we need to take stock and to keep pace of the progress on all the roadmaps and energy compacts that we had agreed on. If you look at the timeline, I think the best possible timeline would be to look at something happening in parallel or a decision happening on the sidelines of the Summit of the Future, and then operationalization after we do the global stocktake. So this is what I propose. Thank you, Vinod.
Thank you very much, Moran, particularly with concrete suggestions that were very well noted. I'm moving on to Frank. Mr. Frank van der Rutten is our policy coordinator from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. Frank, I'm so sorry that we seem to have some time issues here. If you can be a little succinct. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll try to be short, but I wanted to start with, I think, a reflection on the overall presentation and discussion we've had. You know, 2 evenings a week, and on every Saturday morning, I coach a women, or actually a girls' football team. So it's girls under the age of 13 years old. And I've never, ever been able to motivate them by saying what is not right. So I'm only able to motivate them and to let them enjoy the game and let them improve themselves by saying, you know, oh, you did this well, you did that well, here we see change, look at how the team is getting closer together, look at how things are moving. And I think in the overall discussion of SDG7, the whole SDG agenda, of course we needed indicators to say, you know, are we on track, how do we have a dashboard? But we shouldn't make the mistake to let the indicators take away the energy of, let's say, our team. I'd like to have a bigger team. I'd like to have a stronger team. You get better players. I think it's very important. But at the same time, I think all of the team which we have here, and actually the team we have at the Assembly, is the team that is doing the work. And I think we should put a spotlight on that. We should figure out a way how do we show the change happening. And that is much more nuanced, but it is also much richer and much more effective in my view. So I wanted to raise in terms of this, looking ahead on what directions we can take, a couple of points. First of all, we have a lot in place. We have come a long way. We have the SDG7 Global Tracking Report with, I think, an excellent cooperation between the knowledge centers which we have in this space, delivering annually quite an interesting analysis of where we are, where we can go. I'm very much encouraged by the remarks by Heather, how this can be given more value by zooming in a bit more on also the socio-economic dimensions of the energy transition. This is very much about the nexus with other SDGs. In my view, that is about value creation. Can we show the value that we are creating through the energy transition? And can we really communicate that in a clearer way? So I'm very happy that we have that. In terms of the discussions, I think it's good we had the high-level dialogue on energy. It's very good we have this expert group under the SDG7 Technical Advisory Group. But it does make sense to think about how do we take it from here? What could be more, let's say, permanent arrangements? Already now I miss the type of dynamics we had in the run-up to the high-level dialogue on energy. So I'm very much in line with my neighbor, with the proposals. How do we actually give a new future-oriented approach to that? And how can we actually get that organized in a form of a platform or something else? So thank you for sharing those ideas. Then I think we do have a plan. And the overall plan is also this roadmap for the acceleration of SDG7. What I wanted to stress here is that that roadmap has two, basically, actually three, but so there's a short-term time goal. Then we have the 2030 goals for SDG7, and we have the 2050 goal of net zero. I think we didn't express yet, and I think we can do a lot more work there. What is the value we are creating on those stepping stones? What is in 2030 a world look like that has sort of delivered on this integrated SDG agenda? And we realize that there's going to be a completely imperfect world, also in the energy sector, is going to be completely half-finished and a lot of issues there. So also, where do we feel we are going towards 2050? And yesterday I mentioned that in the terms of clean cooking. I said this clean cooking pathway and taking this as a binary thing, it's either clean cooking or not, is not adequate. We need to have a focus on how are we going to transition household living conditions, position of women in rural communities, basically looking at the kitchen instead of just the cooking. There's a behavior issue. It's much more than just bringing a hardware installation and it's done and we've completed our job. So we need to step beyond that binary perspective and really think, how do we do that? So in the discussion which you're proposing, and I think this is also on the timeline towards the SDG7 review and the summit and thinking about where do we go with having a platform or another way to really exchange deeper. I think it's good that we use the coming half year or so, if possible, to think about what themes do we really have out there. I see vague notions in the discussion like just energy transition. But what is it? And what is the value we are creating from that? And what is really the content we want to give that there? I think yesterday we discussed leapfrogging to clean development pathways. This is clean energy pathways, so it has an energy technology side. But it's also really development. So can we already now develop our narrative, our thinking around that, which would sort of shape our discussions towards that review, but in my view also towards that agenda, thinking about 2050. Where are we going with this overall transition in the energy space? Of course, there's a lot of talk about, there's another topic on which we could develop our views, is new energy trade. Of course, a lot of interest in hydrogen, green hydrogen, but what does it mean? We just stepped out of a session on extractives for the energy transition. How do we look at that? So these are different topics from just counting the binary numbers of people with their first clean cooking or the percentage of renewables in the mix. Final point which I wanted to make there is we are doing a lot of work, and I think a lot of work is happening in many places on innovative finance and investment to bridge the investment gap. That is also one of those things which is really difficult to capture. I find that in the high-level dialogue on energy, probably the most difficult topic which we try to address. And at the same time, we are making big progress, and we see patient capital stepping in, we see big philanthropy stepping in, we see the dynamics change. We also see things bouncing back. So that would, for me, also be a sort of a cross-cutting topic on which we could really zoom in and try to figure out towards the review and towards thinking beyond, let's say, the position where we are now, where do we take the financial dimension, the investment dimension of our work? Maybe I should stop there for time's sake. So.
Thank you very much, Frank. Very rich sort of ideas. So we duly noted on this one. I have two more. The panelists here, Radia and Sierra. I think we are getting very sort of pressed on this time. Would you be quite succinct, and then if you could, and then we try to wrap things up. So first, Radia from ESCO, please.
Certainly, because I'm called to another session, which in line with what we are being reporting now, related to how the EU and the MENA region can further enhance collaboration, specifically when it comes to upscale the investment on clean energy solutions. And obviously, one of the main messages that we're vehiculing is that really we need concrete actions and we need really to see cross investment, not just talking about security supply for Europe, but look also the economic development of the MENA region. So to change the business model, certainly as Hans and also Frank just said, when we just this morning we had discussing with the youth, and we were very lucky to see their insight and how they don't feel they are integrating the decision making, where they have very good ideas to bring to scale the investment. And I would just say to one of them that you will never reach your destination if you stop every time someone tell you something that is negative. And that's why we're not the empty or the full of the bottle, but basically we just move forward. And the energy sector always, you have multi-dimensional uncertainties, you just need to move and take a risk to invest. So we, in the MENA region, obviously you've seen through the presentation done by United Arab Emirates, the host country of this event, that tremendous work been done, and still, and you will see the capacities coming concretely through the outlook, also the IA presenting the capacities of renewable energy and hydrogen coming from the MENA region due to the lowest cost, but also due to the willingness to really invest in clean energy transition. And obviously, it's not just about the low cost of investment. For some of them have the capacity, like the GCC, and we see the capacity coming more than $100 billion by the United Arab Emirates and the US in the clean energy investment, but also more than $100 billion by the United Kingdom, both in renewable energy and hydrogen coming by 2030. But certainly currently we are among the lowest in terms of renewable energy intensity, so it's all about how to link the economic development, the climate, and at the same time while achieving the SDGs. 2050 would not be realistic from our perspective as a regional commission. We feel that needs to be more than that. So one of the focus areas we will have at the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development 14-15, the focus will be not to look at the challenges, because we know them. We just look at the policy and regulatory framework, what are the gaps and how to address them in an integrated approach, and how to bring different stakeholders, not just the energy sector, different stakeholders to see how we bridge the gap. Number two is in terms of finance. So basically the Climate Finance Forum held last year by all the regional commissions, and we had one at the COP. Basically, we had less than between 5 and 6% coming to the region. So the idea is to look at the small scale and the risk in investment, but at the same time, how to, through the MENA EU-Europe dialogue, since we have common interest to have the security of supply for both, how basically to upscale the investment and bring different investors in order to make the electricity market in the region much more realistic, which basically, as it progresses now, the plan is 2035, since the plan is already, the pilot project was positive last year, initiated in Egypt. Other element that I want to highlight, that the major challenge that we face and we try to consider is the interlinkages. In whatever we are speaking about progress here, what the indicators and the progress, if you tell me SDG7 energy access in the region, it's below 90%, I will tell you this is not realistic, because the real problem in the field is that we do not have concretely the reporting and the progress as reflected in the energy, water, and food and agriculture sector. Specifically where we are focusing our area of work, how to an investment with our member state looking to clean cooking and electricity access, since 10% is the gap in energy access and 15% in clean cooking. And both solutions, we just came from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They are also trying to finance certain projects in Eastern Africa, looking to the merge of the two solutions together through small-scale renewable technologies and clean cooking solutions through LPG. This is what I had to say, but just I want to highlight that the element that we look at it as well from the regional commissions, and if I may speak about our sister organizations, we are working after the extractives and under the section of the SG on his policy brief on the critical raw materials that support the energy transition. So the 5 regional commissions are leading in looking to this element in order to change the business model as we have it today, because you can have an energy transformation, but if those who have the resources, not oil and gas, but those who drive that energy transformation do not have the right economic development, do not have peace, then basically
basically we didn't solve the problem in the long-term perspective. So this is an area where all the regional commissions are working on it, and we assume that by the next year, under the leadership of ESCAP, we'll focus more on de-risking investment in this area and look at it from an integrated approach in the economic and social and environmental dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite Sira from Energia.
Thank you very much, Minoru. And just in keeping with what Frank said, for looking at, I really like the proposal about seeing the value addition of SDGs and through the nexus that it has with other development goals. And in this regard, I think there's overwhelming consensus that gender equality is critical for achieving SDG7 and the Paris Agreement goals. And this is reflected also in the global roadmap for accelerated SDG7 action that recognizes very clearly that sustainable energy access and its deployment can be improved and accelerated by gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And because of this, the roadmap is very clear on calling on governments, but also other stakeholders to prioritize actions to mainstream gender in all energy policy investments and programs. Yet, Frank, in trying to be positive, you can't help but really look at what the evidence is showing us. And the evidence that was presented at the 2022 High-Level Political Forum, during which member states and the international community conducted an in-depth review of SDG 5, which is the SDG on gender equality. The report that came out of UN Women found that SDG 7 is one of the only 6 SDGs that has no specific gender indicator. So if we have 17 minus 6, we're amongst the few that are not really being accountable to gender commitments. In addition, Kanika, you will be very aware that we had, there was also a voluntary self-reporting on gender, but also an expert group of Energia UNIDO and GWNet did assessment of the energy compacts, and this was reported on the report that was mentioned earlier, the 2022 Energy Compact Annual Progress Report. And out of the 141 compacts that were assessed, these were the compacts that were available online at the time, 92% were gender neutral, meaning that they did not have any explicit or intentional mention of gender in their commitment, while only 3% were found to be gender transformative. That means that they included specific gender outcomes in the language that we used in the Energy Compact reporting, monitoring mechanisms to measure these outcomes, and financial investments, very importantly, the financing required to achieve their gender ambitions. So when we look at this picture and juxtapose it to the time that we have to achieve the 2030 agenda and even beyond, really it's unacceptable that we continue to have lack of concrete commitments to gender and the financing that is required. And we urgently, as we're doing our stock taping and thinking about how we move forward, we urgently need to address, this urgently needs to be addressed by the SDG7 community. So Frank, I'm trying to be optimistic, but the evidence is not taking me there. However, let me just say something that Mr. Paul Mbuthi alluded to, which I think is certainly the way that we need to go, rather than having, like you said, Frank, siloed efforts, is aggregating our efforts. And I think that is really, for me, the value addition of the compacts, that it's bringing together different efforts and trying to build on economies of scale. The Gender and Energy Compact, which is a global multi-stakeholder coalition that brings 10 champion governments and more than 75 actors from the private sector, academia, civil society, youth, and international organizations, all with the same objective: to promote a just and inclusive transition. And for us, the just and inclusive transition means that one that is gender responsive, energy transition that is gender responsive. We have identified 4 key change pathways that we feel are really important as we move forward. 1, eliminating energy and time poverty as well as drudgery for women, adopting gender responsive sustainable energy policies and transition strategies, increasing access to productive resources, particularly finance and business development services for women enterprises in the sector, facilitating inclusive career advancement for women in the space, and also having equal share of women's participation in decision-making fora and discussions, and by ensuring gender-responsive accountability mechanisms, including the use of sex-disaggregated data and indicators to inform evidence-based programming. So with this, I think the compact is one of the shining stars that is there now, and encourage all of us here to join it yesterday, actually, but also happy to provide information on this. But looking forward to seeing how the coalition that we have can contribute to the path, Minoru, that you laid in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much here. I must apologize that we have representative from government of Denmark and then also representative from International Atomic Energy Agency who are wanting to sort of take the floor, but I have been reminded already 5 times that we need to close this one. So I apologize that you may not be able to sort of give you the time for the floor, but the next time I'll make sure that you'll have opportunity to do that. But thank you very much for the panelists for the great suggestions. I leave one thing here is that UN is extremely committed to making sure that we'll be able to step up on SDG7 this time. That we are at the midpoint, and we're going to be preparing, good sort of, notes, including a global preparatory meeting at the technical level end of April in New York. So in due course, you'll be able to receive some information. Hopefully, you'll be able to all come and join and contribute together before we get to the SDG7 review at high-level political forum in July. With that, I'll back to Martin for closing.
Thank you very much, Minoru, for your excellent moderation. And without further ado, I would like to thank you all very much for your participation, especially all the speakers, which enriched this session. And would like to close this event on SDG7 at midpoint. Thank you very much to everyone.